Hello, everyone. We'll wait just a couple of more minutes for all attendees to arrive. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar hosted by the International Society for the Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect. Today's webinar focuses on the importance of using international child protection frameworks adapted with faith-based materials in order to equip faith leaders with the knowledge and skills they need to prevent and respond to cases of child abuse and neglect. Right now, I have everyone on mute to avoid background noise. We welcome you to enter questions and comments in the chat box throughout the presentation. The presenter will answer any questions at the end as time permits. Maryam Ehsani has almost a decade of experience working with governments and organizations to implement and strengthen the United Nations International Child Safeguarding Standards frameworks. Through the nonprofit Keeping Children Safe, she supports more than 75 international, national, and local organizations working in almost every country, ensuring quality of standards implementation and providing technical advice and coaching to members. In addition, through a partnership with USAID, Maryam has delivered child safeguarding workshops in Africa and successfully led the first ever child safeguarding conference there in 2014, which brought together 250 participants, including government entities, donors, and local and international NGOs across 49 countries. She is currently setting up an international working group around child safeguarding in faith-based settings, which will focus on sharing best practices and overcoming challenges in this area of work. Maryam, we thank you for being with us today and for your work protecting children all over the world. Now I will turn it over to you.
Hello, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today, and thanks to ISPCAN for organizing this opportunity for me to share this webinar and this important subject with you all. I hope you can hear me. Heather, can you hear me? I'm sure you do. Okay, so great. Okay, brilliant. So thanks for the introduction. So today's subject, as Heather mentioned, is going to be about how can we support faith leaders to become champions in child protection. Before I start and go into the webinar, I want to give you a bit of overview about the organization that I'm currently working with, which is Keeping Children Safe, which was established in 2001 by a group of leading humanitarian relief and development charities in the context of emerging reports that children were being abused by aid workers in emergency camps in West Africa. And this is when Keeping Children Safe started and established itself and registered as a charity and a company in order to represent the commitments by organizations worldwide to protect children by developing and promoting a set of policies and procedures towards the international child safeguarding standards for all organizations do not harm to children. So I have been working with Keeping Children Safe for the past 8 years, and in Keeping Children Safe, the idea of what we are promoting to the 75 organizations that we are working with, it's in regards to the 4 standards, which is obviously in terms of the UNCRC and child safeguarding. First of all, I mean, we need to make sure that we have a policy in place on child protection. The second standards is talks about people in order to make sure that the people that we are hiring are safe to work with children, and we do all checks and have a clear responsibility for the people that we put in touch with the children to deliver the projects and programs that we deliver throughout our work. And thirdly, the standards is on procedures, which we need to make sure that all the organization in terms of different departments is equipped towards the different policies and procedure in relation to communication, HR, sponsorship, and furthermore, you know, the overall organization. And the standard 4, it's accountability, you know, where the organization monitors and reviews its safeguarding measures in order to make sure that organizations are safe and have all the equipment in terms of policies and procedure and knowledge and resources when it comes to child safeguarding. So in my area of work, I work with many organizations working with faith communities, and they deliver work through faith communities, child protection. And this is the area that came to our attention in Keeping Children Safe, that there is a gap when it comes to supporting faith leaders. So as Heather mentioned, the webinar will be on faith leaders and how we can promote the child safeguarding standards and how can we support them. So with that, I'm going to start through the webinar and take you through, and then if there's any questions, obviously you can always ask them at the end. So the objectives of today's webinar is I will discuss the role and responsibility of the faith leaders in our communities, because as faith leaders, you know, as someone who is important in the community, that everybody looks into them when it comes to the good practices and behavior, they have a very important key role and responsibility that I will go through. I will touch into the adaptation of the child safeguarding framework into faith setting, which again, I mean, as having a UNCRC policies and procedures, and then you have the standards that we promote in order to equip organization. Then again, if we go into, if we narrow it down, then it goes into faith leaders and different communities and different beliefs in order to support those communities to develop child safeguarding and promote it throughout their work. And obviously there are challenges going forward, and it's not an easy process, as I have come across a lot of organizations discussing the challenge, and there is a lot of common challenges throughout the work that they deliver. And I will also discuss what next and what can be done. And obviously Heather mentioned that I have launched the working group on child safeguarding through our members, 75 members, which we will gather all the information and see what's out there and how we can support faith leaders. So where does child abuse take place? I mean, I would love to hear everyone talking about this or answering me, but I'm guessing like you guys are thinking about this question. Where does child abuse take place? I mean, it's very important to think about that. Children can be obviously abused in any environment given a certain set of circumstances. So, I mean, it would be really naive to assume that child abuse could not happen within our faith communities. And this was said by the Muslim Parliament of Great Britain, which again, I have worked with them previously. So if we think about it, I mean, if we go to, I mean, church or mosque or any kind of faith, any belief, we know that those faith leaders are protecting our children, are there to keep children safe and to deliver and teach what's needed in order for their development. So this quote, I mean, it's very, very key really to understand that child abuse can happen anywhere, not only through the work in the programs in the communities, but also can take place in faith communities. So what are the faith leaders' role in our communities? Obviously, the first thing is to promote protection and justice and fairness. And how would they do that? Because they have a very good influence and very good position when it comes to influencing the family, the parenting structure, and also the children through schools, like religious schools or religious get together throughout the different faith. So they need to be the ones to promote protection and justice and fairness. And imagine if we equip the faith leaders towards the child safeguarding measures, and how can we support them and provide the resources? This would mean that they will know when it comes to a child abuse concern how to deal with it, and also if there is any concern in terms of the knowledge gap in those communities, they can support them throughout their knowledge that they know about child protection and they know how to promote it. And also to support healthy development of children and youth. As I said, as a faith leader, they have the influence. I have attended religious schools back in the UK and also in different regions, and I have seen that how children connect throughout the schools with the faith leaders, and they listen to what's there to be said. So if we again have the resources for those faith leaders or the teachers that they are teaching our children in those faith schools, then they will encourage the healthy development of the children and youth. And thirdly, to cultivate a faith message, because if we think about it, child protection is not a new thing. Through the research that I've been doing for my PhD that I'm starting this year, I can see that child protection is visible in many faith and religions. It's just the interpretation of how we are going to take that message out there and influence in order to promote a safe environment for children in our communities. Also, to share a good child protection practices with parents and guardians. Again, there is a lot of work that goes into supporting the parents and the guardians throughout the religious communities and schools, and coming together and talking about child safety and child protection in general. So imagine if we have those resources available for the faith leaders, then they can have an influence, because child protection is the role and the responsibility of everyone. We can't just say it's the government or it's the NGOs working. It's everybody has to have a role and responsibility when it comes to the implementation of child protection practices. And again, to acknowledge child protection as a key element, because unfortunately, throughout my work that in child protection and child safeguarding is not seen as a standalone policy. It's not seen as a standalone in organization when it comes to the strategic planning for the organization and the allocation of resources and staff, and when it comes to budgeting even. So why this is the case? We need to really influence organizations, influence faith leaders, that child protection is a key element that can keep our community safe, the reputation, and also the children are going to be safe, and you mitigate the risks by equipping the organization and the faith communities towards the knowledge that they should have, and they will be sharing that knowledge throughout their work. And finally, which again, to increase accountability and transparency, because one of the things that is unfortunately happening is underreporting, or there is the silent culture. The silent culture, unfortunately, it takes place in many faith communities, just because it's not very common for someone to speak about a concern or to raise a concern when it comes to child abuse. So if we increase the accountability and have everybody working as a team in those communities, to each of them understand their roles and responsibilities towards child safeguarding, then it will minimize and take that big risk away in order for them to deliver the work and make sure that there is accountability and somebody is checking, and they need to be transparent when it comes to the delivery of their work. So how can we adapt international framework in faith setting? I mean, we touched base what's the role of the faith leaders, and now we need to discuss like how to adapt it. So by talking to organizations saying that, I mean, I get that a lot. People say, what is the difference of child protection and child safeguarding? The definition is still unclear to so many people. But when we talk about child safeguarding, we are talking about the roles and responsibility of the organization, the staff working in the organization, the faith leaders working in those communities. Each of them has a role and responsibility. So they need to first start with having a clear and transparent policy and procedure that is, enrolled in throughout the organization, that everybody's aware of the policy. When you have a policy visible and you talk about it, one of the recommendations I usually give to the organizations that I work with, have child safeguarding as a fixed agenda item when it comes to your board meetings. Have it there, discuss it all the time. I mean, some people say, well, we don't have any child abuse concern, there's nothing going on. But still, once you have a clear and transparent policy and you talk about it, then that will promote and encourage reporting and make sure that you have the right direction towards the child safeguarding measures in your organization, which in this case is the faith communities that we are talking about. And partnership with government and policymakers to discuss the overall role and responsibilities. So in some countries, it's not possible. I mean, I have worked in African countries, in different countries, there is no, connection between the national nose or the organization or the faith communities working. Obviously, if there was, it would be perfect. It would be good, because then there is the accountability that comes through the government. But again, I mean, the organization, if they do the necessarily, implementation of the child safeguarding and define the role and responsibility of all these religious teachers or the faith leaders in the communities, then, we know that at least we're doing our part in order to promote that. And in case of other countries, I mean, I worked with the Charity Commission in the UK. They are promoting it, and they are trying to have that accountability towards different organizations before even becoming a charity or registering as a charity. Set up a child protection committee with designated child protection officer. This is very important because, if you go and train a faith community in child protection and child safeguarding, and then you don't define the roles and responsibility of who needs to be doing what, it can be overwhelming. It can be difficult to understand who is doing what, and if any child abuse concern take place, who should this be reported to, and who is the person to take action? Because I have trained organizations that they do understand child protection and child safeguarding, but they don't have a clear guidance on who is responsible. So this is a very key area, to have a reporting chart, to have a structure towards how this concern will be raised and who is going to take care of it. Because we don't want that, there will be a concern and it will be raised and then no action will be taken. And this has happened. I mean, it does happen, but we don't want that, because this is not promoting child safeguarding and child protection, and it's not encouraging our faith leaders to promote this, good practices throughout their communities. And assess the national laws. I mean, this is really helpful when it comes to doing a legal mapping, because obviously in any region that you are delivering a work or working, or you funding a faith community or working with faith leaders, you need to make sure that you understand the national laws. You have a legal mapping that defines what are the national laws, what are the accountabilities towards faith communities, and how is it connected when it comes to child protection initiative. Educate children about their rights and give them a voice in their communities. Child participation can be promoted through the faith leaders. They can encourage children to come together and talk about child protection. There are languages, in terms of understanding child protection for children. Children have resources, user-friendly, like child user-friendly, in order for them to understand if they have a child abuse concern, or there is is a concern about someone working in the school or in the faith communities, they can report it. But obviously, if we don't share that with the children and there is a lack of child participation, then they won't have their voice, and their voice there won't be heard. And without the children, we don't know if we're doing it right. So that's one thing that we need to promote towards our faith communities, and tell them that this is the best way. Child participation should be encouraged in order to implement this better. And promote an open dialogue in encouraging reporting. Reporting, I mean, I work with different faiths. The reporting is not an easy subject to talk about, unfortunately, but we need to talk about it more often and find the way to get to influence or to understand. Because if you want to go out there and say you need to just report, in any faith communities is not going to go well at first. It has to be using their language, their resources, in order to have that connection, in order to have that influence in encouraging reporting mechanisms. And there are tools, there are resources that different organizations that I work with use in different communities throughout different regions in the world in order to promote reporting. And obviously sharing child protection commitments with staff and parents and children. So child protection should not only lie with the faith leaders, with the faith communities, but it should be shared with everyone, all the beneficiaries, all the teachers, all the parents, and the children that are involved in those coming together in the faith communities that we're talking about. So child protection and faith can work together to protect children. Many people would say they would disagree with this, but I think it does. Child protection must be a key consideration in all faith. I have researched and I have seen child protection, as I said, visible in all religions, in all faith, and all beliefs. But it's just the fact that we need to highlight it more. We need to have it as a standalone rather than something that fits with other policies and procedures. Faith leaders can become a child protection champions by advocating good educational and parental practice. If we go about, saying that if you share this information with the parents, it would mean that children are more safe. It means you mitigating those risks around the schools, around the parenting practices, and anything that takes place in those communities needs to be risk assessed. If you do a risk assessment and legal mapping in order to support the faith leader and show them that by doing this work, you will be the champions and you will be promoting child protection. And what better than having, faith leaders promoting child protection, because it will get there quicker, and it will get there, in a way that people will accept it better if it comes through the religion and the faith leaders' communication with the parents and the children themselves. So these are two quotes that I researched. In 2014, the Vatican announced the creation of a new dedicated group to help the church deal with child abuse or abuse crisis. So it does happen. I mean, a lot of people are now thinking more about it, thinking about the fact that if they don't go into, having the resources on child protection and child safeguarding throughout their faith communities, it would mean that the higher risk of child abuse and also the reputation of their organization will be, questioned if they don't take the extra measures in order to equip their staff and their faith leaders throughout their work. And talking to Harrow Islamic Center as well in the UK, they provided training and workshop to all of their staff and mosque and madrasas, and they have seen a very positive, impact through this, because it did encourage reporting, it did encourage people talking more about it, and it became something that it's not invisible. Organizations or the Harrow Islamic Center is encouraging madrasas to talk about child protection in a regular basis, and also the mosque throughout their teaching materials that they deliver to the children and the parents. So why not talk to the faith leaders and encourage them to see the importance of child safeguarding and how they can promote, child protection throughout their work, and they can be the champions. So it does happen. I have seen it, but there is a lot to be done, still a lot to be done in order to make sure that we know that faith leaders and faith communities are well equipped and they have the resources. So what are the challenges? I mean, I talked about a bit of it, but child abuse is seen as a taboo. You know, if I talk to faith leaders in mosques and churches, and they say, no, child abuse does not take place in our community. We don't have that, you know. And the thing is, why do they react in such a way? Why do they speak in such a way that it doesn't exist? Because they don't have the equipment, the knowledge, the resources that can support them throughout the process. So shame, you know, there is a lot of shame and stigma and silent culture in different cultures, in different religions. You know, if you speak, you might cause a problem to the children or the family, or in the community they will be not accepted. But all of this can be done by, you know, following standards, by following a framework in order to support them. But these challenges do exist, so we can't just say there are no challenges when it comes to supporting faith communities. And diversity around faith communities, you know, there are different you know, faith leaders in the same faith or in the same religion having different views. So they talk about child protection in a different way, in a different language. So if we bring them together, so through the work that the working group that I launched through the Keeping Children Safe, this is the idea of seeing how can we bring diversity, more diversity, how can we bring these faith communities together to understand the key message of child protection rather than having different meaning to it, which again is a challenge. Funding is another challenge, that it's not only for faith communities, but also for many other organizations that I speak with them when it comes to implementing child safeguarding. I hear that we don't have the resources, we don't have the staff to undertake, you know, implement the child protection and child safeguarding measures in the organizations. There is always solution. You don't need to always have, you know, so much funding and budgeting when it comes to implementing child protection. I mean, through Keeping Children Safe, you can see on our website, we have resources on how to implement child safeguarding. So that helps, you know, if we share the resources throughout the organization, throughout the faith communities that we know, this will mean that we are encouraging more people to talk about it and to encourage them to implement it without going through the challenges. But these are the key challenges that I have come across working with faith leaders and faith communities. And obviously lack of knowledge in specific areas and reporting mechanisms. If we don't know how to report, if we don't have the right knowledge, then it can be a challenge. It can be confusing and overwhelming in what to do next and how to do it and who is going to take action. So these are the key challenges, and I'm hoping, you know, in the future they will be minimized, hopefully by the work that many other organizations are doing and promoting towards supporting faith leaders in child protection. So how can we support faith leaders to become champions, you know, in child protection? First of all, we need to create the child protection system that overcomes the taboo around child abuse subject. Also, we need to emphasize the connection of child protection and faith. They can also look into child protection standard to fit in the best language, you know, in terms of their faith. So not only saying child protection has to be implemented, but also relating it to their faith. You know, when it comes that in your religion, it does mention that child rights is important. The protection of children are very important in our faith, and this means, you know, the interpretation of child protection is already stamped into the faith communities. Advocating for the elimination of bad cultural behavior against children. I mean, there are so many bad cultural behaviors taking place in different communities throughout culture, throughout faith. But again, what we have done, I mean, I'm not going to name organizations, but yes, I have worked with one organization that what we did, we had to train the eldest in the communities or the faith leaders or the people who are well known in that community, in order to equip them with the resources and the knowledge, and then we support them to go and talk with others in the community to say, okay, this is child protection, we can do that, this is a bad cultural behavior, this is against the safety of the children. And then they have that language, which obviously it's always much better to help to get that done by supporting the community people themselves, rather than just going on your own and trying to raise awareness without engaging them through the process. And sharing the message that child protection is not a new concept. It's there already in all faith. It's a role and responsibility for all of us, in order to have healthy development of our children, in order to keep them safe from abuse, from any kind of abuse that can take place throughout the school, throughout the faith communities, and anything that surround our children. And using different media and their community involvement to share the message, which again, this is similar to what I mentioned, having someone who can support you rather than going on your own. I mean, sometimes language can be a barrier, and it helps if you know the language, obviously, but sometimes, like, if you get engaged with them and you start with one person, two person, and then that would give you a higher chance in developing those measures and practices in place, and influencing the faith communities and the faith leaders to come on board with you, because that's what we need. We need the faith leaders to come on board, in understanding the child safeguarding, and to promote it throughout their schools and mosque, churches, and any kind of faith engagements that they have. So what do the faith leaders need to do? First of all, create the awareness. There are so many tools that can faith leaders use in order to create awareness around child protection and child safeguarding, by having working groups for the parents to come together, for the children to have child participation, to involve them. And sometimes you can involve children and parents to come together, but obviously use different materials in order to engage each of the beneficiaries and create that awareness around what does child protection mean, and why we need to talk about it, why we need to discuss it on a regular basis. Set a response measure to allegation of child abuse. Again, reporting, it's very important, and to encourage that, and to have the right training and workshops and resources for the faith leaders to understand how to investigate, if any child abuse concern arise in the faith communities, how can they investigate it? There are resources that you can equip yourself to investigate it internally. Obviously, first thing you have to do, you have to be reported to the local authority, or depending on the national laws and the legal mapping of the region. But again, it would be great to have a set of clear guidance on allegation of child abuse and how to respond to those allegations when it comes to it. And promote guidance and developing child protection frameworks in faith communities. If we start by saying the faith communities, they need to have a policy, a child protection policy, then by the policy, the code of conduct, which will promote good behavior, bad practice behavior, and then it would say that this is bad practice, this is what we don't allow for it to happen in the organization, in our communities. This is the way we need to move forward in order to promote a healthy child protection frameworks throughout the work that we deliver. And again, there are resources, but the idea, every organization is creating their own resources, and the idea of bringing all these resources together in order to promote, those guidelines on child protection frameworks in faith communities, in order to fit into the different languages that each faith leaders or faith community speaks. And follow procedures for safe recruitment. This is very crucial, really crucial. I mean, you have seen in the media, in the news, lately there are so many things happening. If we don't make sure that we have safe recruitment in place, and have the right procedure in order to have the right people working for the children, we are putting children at risk. So the faith leaders need to make sure, like by hiring the religious teachers or the teachers in the religious school, to do the right background check to make sure these teachers or faith leaders that they're working in those communities are safe, and also to not only check on that, but also to equip them with the resources. You know, they need to have all of this. They need to sign the child protection policy. They need to understand it. There should be a regular discussion around it, training, you know, regular training, and also a review of those policy, because sometimes you hear people saying, yes, we have a child protection policy in our faith community, but it was done 5-6 years ago and we never looked into it. So that this is not what we are promoting here. We're promoting a procedure that we can look into it and see what are the gaps, because there is always things that come out of the, you know, the delivery of the programs or the work that we do in different communities of the work that we deliver. So there should be a review of those procedures towards the child protection and child safeguarding. So here you can see it's, you know, I got these quotes from the Muslim community and also the other one from the Christian community. So it shows that, you know, neglect a person whom he is responsible for sustaining. It is there, you know, this is child protection. It's promoting, you know, child protection. It's saying that we should not neglect our children. We should not, you know, look into them as children, but also to give them the voice in order to participate, in order for them to understand their rights, in order for them to understand what's right and what's wrong, and how they can, you know, raise a concern if there is, and who to go to. And then again, here it says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. So it exists, you know. This is just some of the quotes. I mean, in the research that I've been doing, there's so many, you know, relationship between faith and child protection, and it does exist, guys, and it's just the way that we should put it out there in order to promote it, in order to raise awareness around it, and to help faith leaders to become child protection leaders in that. So the conclusion, you know, that I would give is we need to always look into assessing risks and mitigating factors. So if we are working in faith communities, the first thing we need to do, we need to look at what are the risks in this community and how we can mitigate them. It can be done by delivering training. It can be done by, you know, having a working group like come together and discuss the policy and the procedures, and also to promote those guidelines internally and externally. Sometimes we say that we don't come in contact with children, you know, the faith leaders does, but again, we have a role and responsibility in supporting the faith leaders in the communities if we are funding these organizations, or if we are partnering with these organizations in different region in the field, that they need to be having that knowledge, you know, and promoting it throughout the external community as well. It's not necessarily just having the policy and not talking about it. And obviously building a knowledge for families and the wider communities. There are a lot of work that's been done through many organizations in bringing families together, bringing the faith group together, and talking about child protection, you know, as a subject that can relate to everyone in the community, that we want to keep children safe, and appoint a child protection officer to lead the initiative. I mentioned that, and I will mention it again and again. Someone has to take care of the child protection implementation plan, although it's the role of everyone in the organization, in the faith communities. But if there is no one person who takes care of it, and if there is a child abuse concern that comes to it, and then how to take that forward and raise awareness and do the investigation, then it's not going to work if we say that, yes, child protection is understood, but there is no one, you know, working on that initiative. So that's one of the key areas that needs to be discussed through our faith communities. And also reporting mechanisms. We need to encourage it. There are tools, there are flow charts, that promote child safeguarding reporting, and how it can be done and who to go to, depending on the structure of the organization in our faith communities and the organizations that we work, or they deliver the work to the children. And increase child participation, which again, it's very important, because without the children themselves, we are not going to do the right things. We need to hear the children. There are youth communities, that the youth working groups, that they discuss child protection, and they talk about what's working and what's not working when it comes to the implementation of child protection policy. So as a conclusion, I would like to say that, with knowing that faith leaders have an important role to play in our communities, in our society, we need to find a way. And how to find a way, these are the recommendation that was giving. But again, I am not going to say it's an easy process, because there are challenges. We did discuss the challenges, and we need to come together. So I'm hoping with the working group that I launched, I want to bring, different organizations like Islamic Relief, Church Mission Society, Tear Fund, all of the organizations that do work in faith communities and also have an influence. What do they use? What are the resources, and how can we put those resources together in order to promote it, at a wider range, rather than just having different faith working on their own as a silo, in promoting child protection? Because child protection is a universal language in any faith, in any community, in any society. It should be a universal message, and we should all come together in order to implement it. So I would like to thank you for attending the webinar today, and I'm more than happy to take questions now. And yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Maryam. Please hold on a moment while we change presenter mode.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. We have a few questions from attendees.
Yes.
Maryam, we have a question about religious services. Religious services are somewhat strict and structured in practice. How are the leaders finding success in sharing this info to the community? Religious schools are for the kids, but how are parents and adults also educated?
Okay, so in religious, coming together and obviously promoting child safeguarding. I'm talking from the experience of working with these organizations. As I said, you need to have an approach in order to go there and talk to them about child protection in general, and then you need to obviously talk about the connection of child protection and the faith communities, and how can this fit into the communities, and how could it promote the safety of the children and the healthy development of the children. There are resources, there are people, the Muslim communities, the Christian communities, they have a set of resources that they use in order to support them. But it's as I said, it's not going to be an easy thing to do. But I have seen organization doing it, and they are getting there. And your second part of the question about how to engage parents, through all, the religious groups that I have worked with, there is always a communication between the faith leaders and the parents, and there is a get together for the parents to come together. And so having a workshop or a training for the parents on child protection from a perspective of faith can really be influential, because parents will take it in a way that, okay, this is coming through the religious school, this is coming through our faith, and they can relate to it better, rather than just saying this is child protection, we need to change our way of dealing with things, but rather have the faith leaders lead on this by equipping them with the right knowledge and the resources in order to influence the parents to come together and bring them on board as well. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you very much for that information. Here's another one from an attendee who says, I work in a predominantly underprivileged Muslim population where most of the children are not in school. They only go to madrasa for religious training. Denial of basic formal education is also child maltreatment. How can faith leaders help here when they are part of the problem?
Yeah. This is true, and unfortunately, it's true. I mean, I worked with an organization that they do have an influence on madrasas, and it took them about 3-4 years in order to fit child protection as a module in those, trainings and coming together with the children. And it's not even school. So the madrasas, purely obviously is talking about the religion and promoting the religion practices, but it has to be with the right resources, and that has happened in the UK. I know madrasas that they had put resources in place in child protection training. So they trained faith leaders, and then the faith leaders trained other faith leaders, and then this way they promoting child protection through the madrasas, and they are accepting it because they have a policy in the madrasa because of the funding that they receive as well through the religious groups, and they have signed to it saying that yes, we will be promoting child protection through our work, but it's done through the religious knowledge of the madrasas.
Okay, great. Thank you. Here's another one. You've probably touched some on this. This attendee asks, given what we know about the causes of child maltreatment, for example, parenting stress and mental health, neighborhoods, etc., and its prevalence, predominantly neglect, what role can religious communities play in primary prevention beyond awareness raising?
Okay, so basically, when we talk about child protection, I mean, I had scenarios like this with work with communities that there's a high poverty and there is the basic needs are not met. So if we talk about, yes, the faith leaders need now to go and influence them in child protection, we need to be realistic as well, when it comes to the work that we deliver with the faith communities or the influence we want to have on the parents in order for them to understand child protection. So I mean, in small communities, with one of the organizations who's a member of Keeping Children Safe, we delivered a webinar on how to develop the community in small communities, communities that they don't even have the basic needs. How can this be done? So there are like coming together, parents do come together, not purely on child protection and talking about the safety of the children, but it come together in terms of talking about different things, problems and challenges in the communities, and the health development of their children, food, all of the basic needs discussion. So then through these programs, what they have done, they have introduced child protection through the programs that they deliver, and it has been taken a bit better than just going directly saying this is child protection, this is what needs to be done. There's always a way to get into it, rather than saying it's challenging and it can't be done. So it's about doing the local mapping, understanding, there's an exercise you do about local mapping in order to find out who is out there in the community, who can have an influence, and how can we connect these entities together in order to influence child protection and implement child protection throughout the overall communities. So in this case, we're talking about faith leaders. If the faith leaders have the different measures and different ways to promote it and the knowledge on how to do that, rather than just saying we need the policy and you need to be doing that, then it might work better, in that case.
Okay, great. Thank you. And here's a question about funding. Is outside funding involved to help get these programs established in the churches and mosques, et cetera? Or has it been effective to ask the churches themselves to pay for these programs?
Okay, so some of the funders and donors, we trying to influence them because, as you know, not all funders and donors see child protection as a necessity from the beginning before going through the application of the funding. So it's very important that those funders and donors, first of all, have this as a criteria. So one child protection implementation plan is a criteria for giving that funding. The churches or the madrasas or whoever is getting those funding from those donors and private, people around who fund and sponsor, then if they know that they need to be doing, child protection, they need to have they need to show that child protection is taken care of, then this is how it starts, and it will help, because it can be a motivator, unfortunately, but it is sometimes the way to go forward. And we are trying hard to bring on board the donors and funders in order to promote it. So, for example, I mean, Charity Commission in the UK, this is what they created a new resources in order to promote that, saying that before you become a charity, before you become a madrasa, or before you become a faith community leaders or support, you need to have that child protection policy in place. So if there is no funding for it, then obviously some organizations do ask specifically for the funding in order to implement child protection and have the resources in place.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple more. Have you seen cases, Maryam, where in a community where perhaps the community or even maybe staff at a church or a mosque are interested in implementing child protection policies, but maybe the leader is not so interested, or vice versa? A leader is very interested, but the community is not engaged. And what can be done in that situation?
Yeah, so in that situation, I mean, with my role that I have now, working with 75 organizations, and each of the country organization have different country offices that they work with different partners, I get to see a lot of that. And sometimes, I mean, they want me to go and speak with them and say that, this is the importance of having that, and then you have to show it from their own perspective. If you don't have that policy in place, your reputation might go down. If anything happens, then you don't know how to deal with the child abuse concern. So there is ways of speaking with them and bringing them on board, rather than, because I have had that a lot. Usually the senior management, they are the ones that they push it down, and they don't see it as a priority, because for them priority is to have the classes run and the training happening in terms of the madrasa and religious materials. But when it comes to training their staff and teachers, religious teachers, then they don't see that as a priority in the organization. But once you bring them on board and show them what does child protection mean as an organization, you have a role and responsibility, then it can, and I have seen, senior management coming on board and joining the initiative in child protection. But again, you have to go with the fact that I mean, I had influenced some organization, and some of them takes a bit longer. So you have to really go for it and try, and and hope that they will be influenced and they will come on board.
Yes, okay, thank you. Let's see, and we've got one more regarding child marriage. This attendee says, child marriage is prevalent and culturally acceptable in several faiths, especially amongst widespread poverty areas.
Yeah.
How can we change these age-old cultural practices through the faith leaders?
Okay, so throughout some of the work that I do, we had this example in some communities that they say, how do we go and do that? Because this is what it says in the religion. It's acceptable. It's a practice that it's been going for, throughout, our communities and our grandmothers and mothers. So it's very okay in that community. So how can we go and change that? The way forward, what we did, we trained the community in terms of the health development of the children, in terms of the side effects. How would early child marriage would affect the child as a person? How would it affect them? And then you bring like studies and research, and sometimes we have people who went through this themselves, that they come and talk about their experience from that actual community, talking about it, that they were damaged and it was very a very negative stage for them to go through it. So you can bring the health development into it and show that these are the side effects, and hopefully that would give a way to go forward with it.
Okay, great. Thank you. I believe we've gone through all of our questions. If anyone has a last minute question, they can type it in the chat box and we can ask Maryam. And while we're waiting for that, I just wanted to thank everyone for your questions, and for Maryam again for being with us today. I don't see any questions popping up.
You're very welcome. I am very pleased that I was part of this, and thanks for Ispan again. But one final thing I want to say on this, in terms of, funding and resources, resources are available out there, but we need to, share and raise awareness and talk about it. The minute you start talking in the faith communities about child protection, this is when you are a step ahead. A positive things has started already. So not necessarily all the resources you have to pay for, or someone has to come and do the training. There are available resources, and obviously, hopefully, with the working group that it's launched now through Keeping Children Safe, we will gather all these resources together. And throughout my PhD study, this is what I'm aiming to do as well, in bringing all of this together and have a common language when it comes to faith and child protection. So this is the way forward.
Great, thank you. And thank you for sharing this valuable information with us today. I wanted to remind everyone that a recording of this webinar and a PDF version of the slides will be available on our website within 24 hours. We encourage everyone to become a member of ISPCAN so that we can continue having informational webinars like these in the future. And if you are interested in presenting or have ideas for topics for our webinar series, please contact us at resources@ispcan.org. We would also like to take a moment to invite you to join us in Prague this September for our 22nd International Congress. Abstracts are still open, so please check our website for more information on that. Thank you again for your time today, and we hope that you all have a good day or night, depending where you are. Thanks so much.
Thank you.